today is more so geared towards really just looking at the timeline and seeing where we stand here in 2020, and really making changes now so that we are not so affected in a way that brings us to our detriment for the future. So there's a lot of, as I stated on the panel, what I'm sensing, and of course, full disclaimer here, this is me tapping in. This is me not listening to others or being inspired by anything necessarily. Don't take what I say as full factual. It is just, again, intuitive feeling and experience that I am expressing here and just giving you some things to possibly think about. But of course, it's about resonance with that, right? So this is me just expressing that. I want to make that clear because this is not the fear mongering thing at all. But it's definitely more so of a message of really putting yourself in a position to really take your time back and being able to create new timelines and new realities. So basically, what I'm sensing is that there is some very, very advanced technology in the future. It already exists. It doesn't necessarily exist in a way that we think or in a way that is accessible to most people in this year, like 2020. Like it already exists in this space in time, right? But most people are not necessarily, they don't have direct access to it in their awareness. So what I'm sensing is that there's a futuristic technology. What I'm dating into or pushing into with my intuition is 2025. Around that time is the introduction of the awareness of this particular technology. But by the time people get to that point in that year, most people would be more susceptible to agreeing to certain changes presented in 2025. What does that even mean? Well, what I'm seeing is, let's just say, okay, 2025, there's this overmind, right? That is more so creating or connecting to a neural network that is linking everyone to the point where it becomes a complete hive mind. And it's a hive mind that is controlled by specific beings or specific AI. You know, there are clearly controllers of that particular technology. So when you are connected to the hive mind, you are connected to the direct commands of this particular algorithmic experience. Okay, this is already happening. Time is simultaneous. So what is happening is there are some beings from the future who are aware of this in this quote unquote right now, and have seen the effects of this, experienced the effects of this because they're probably also still connected to it, and basically trying to come here to change timelines so that doesn't necessarily have to be the future, right? So that doesn't have to be the future. So it's a possibility. It's something that is happening, but it can absolutely change. It does not have to be your future. We create our own futures, and a solidified collective timeline is most definitely possible when there are enough people that are putting their intention into doing so. So what's happening, especially with COVID and all of that, is that they're herding the sheep into a specific timeline to pick up on specific beliefs about themselves, weakening their immune systems through the mind. Okay, so this is a psychological thing. So you can weaken your own immune system by simply accepting certain beliefs about yourself, about your reality, and so on. So it's like infecting the subconscious mind to now create a reality to where you can possibly get sick, and then that will make you more so dependent on the quote unquote solution that they present to you, which would probably be more so the vaccines and so on. And I would not be surprised if the actual nanotech is within the vaccine itself that actually connects those people to that neural link or to that particular technology, because what COVID is actually, it's an attack on the consciousness. And as far as like the not being able to breathe, that has a lot to do with air, right? So it's all air. It's all about air, being able to breathe, the crown, and so on. So it's literally a psychological attack, an attack on the consciousness, and to bring people more so up into this space to be more susceptible to manipulation and control. Now, the thing about our primal selves, when we are truly connected to that part of ourselves, is that when you're truly grounded, you're not as easily influenced in the air. And I'll say that again, when you're truly grounded within yourself, you're not as easily influenced in the air. And there are parts of us that are able to actually go beyond the grids that are basically, it's a data collection. A lot of what I'm sensing is like, as I said in a video that I made before, it's like a filtration system. So basically what I also sense is that the filter is dirty and they're clearing the filter. So what I mean is people's thoughts, constant thoughts, the collective within itself, a collective thought process, they get caught up. The thoughts or the thought forms actually have form, and they get kind of like caught up in the filter. So if you have like an air conditioner and it stops blowing the cool air, and because you have to take the filter out and actually clean the filter and then put it back in, and then it's back to normal, right? So the thoughts of the collective are kind of like blocking the filter. So when you have a dirty filter full of thoughts of the collective that are just basically thoughts and feelings and, you know, just realities and beliefs that no one really wants to face necessarily, you have that kind of just out there like dirty snow. Okay, so it's just out there and people are just capturing other people's stuff. So it's like a collective, that's like the whole contagious thing. It's like, oh, like I didn't have this issue before, but because it's just literally in the air, then I am like, there's a more empathetic capturing of someone else's stuff or someone else's baggage. And then it's more so amplified within you in whatever reflects that. So there's a lot of reflecting happening with similar people who have similar resonances. So not everyone is affected by the dirty filter, because there are some of us who are actually able to, when sensing this, able to go beyond that filter, period. So it's like bypassing the whole thing and just watching it from afar. So that's basically what I sense. And they're really trying to get this technology truly like activated on a wide scale so that they can literally control the timeline so that they don't change. So it's like, as I spoke about before, neural pathways, the more you do something or the more you believe something, the bigger the neural pathway gets, the deeper the crevices of that neural pathway gets. And it's just almost sometimes it's really hard to form new neural pathways when it's so easy to fall into an old way that feels familiar constantly. So when people are in constant falling of the same neural pathways or the same timelines, it's easier to keep them there, because it just looks like, it feels like it's impossible to get out of it. It feels like it's the locked in reality and that nothing can actually be done about that. So people just kind of just accept the timeline that is given to them, which is synonymous with accepting a script to a film, right? So you are basically, it's like a scripted life, but you don't remember that it's a script, but it feels familiar, so you're still resonating with it. So a lot of this year is, for a lot of people, have been It's been about stepping outside of the comfort zone so that we can get used to stepping out of comfort zones when necessary, right? And not freak out just to go back into the same comfort that may be scripted and that may constantly lead to a particular fate based upon the set timelines because when we're talking timelines, we're talking individual and collective, and they're all connected because that's how intricate this system is. This network that would, us just being all connected in the slightest move and shift of someone else, choosing and actually creating a new neural pathway sends signals. And the more people that come to that specific resonance, the neural pathway actually starts to form, and it solidifies a timeline that is not on grid. So it's not even a part of the neural network or anything like that. It's a complete different timeline and a shift based upon the actual consciousness of the collective or the individual that is intentionally creating this. So this is why coming more so into your creativity and really nourishing the lower base so that your upper self can actually know, or discern, I should say. There's more so of a discernment that comes with being so connected to the core and to the root of self. So a lot of what we're doing is root work, sacral work, because sexual energy, the womb within itself for women, that is attacked. There are main parts of the body that are usually attacked, and the heart, most definitely, the sacral, the consciousness, the third eye, even expression. So just a lot of that, just reconnecting with root-based stuff, with your creativity within your sacral, your kundalini energy, and really knowing how to harness the power within that space so that you know what you're doing with the energy. The solar plexus, which is more so your digestive system as well. It's also your willpower and how you feel about yourself. And that has so much to do with everything when we're creating the vibration, when we are actually creating our paths, is based upon that resonance. So if you don't feel too great about yourself and you have all of these great ideas, it doesn't really mean anything. They're just ideas because your solar plexus may not necessarily be connected to the confidence that pushes those ideas forward. So digestive system, right? And then we have the heart, which is more so reconnecting with that inner child, that purity, that point of self that cannot be duplicated, that is the creation point of life. If you saw the video that I made with Omar, we had that conversation, that focal point of life within itself begins in that space. So that's something that I wanted to just bring a lot of light to when working with lower base up to heart, at least, so that when we get to the throat, when we get to the third eye, when we get to the crown of self, there's substance. There's substance in that space where there's an inner dependency that can be trusted. So it's not an interdependency with anything or anyone external from you, but an inner dependency in knowing that I'm good and I feel confident and comfortable with moving forward and going into creating the unknown and being okay with that. It doesn't have to be known all the time. And usually when beings are working from the future on back and then moving forward in that timeline, those beings, which are very astral based, they know what's going to happen already. And I know a lot of it is probably mission based, but sometimes it's hard to live a life that way because when you already know it's going to happen in every single step, it's like, I can only imagine what that may feel like to these types of beings, and just knowing what's going to happen, knowing the future, prophesizing only because these beings have the ability to actually go forward in the future and come back and create timelines or shifts But I do feel like there are some beings who are, again, sustaining the timeline. So those would be like the agents that are making sure that it stays so that people end up hurting into a specific future. And there are certain beings who are future based who are actually trying to change the timeline in a way to where it brings humanity back and doesn't get humanity all caught up, or certain aspects of humanity, because it's not really a worldwide thing. You know, some people, we can't expect the entire world to move the same way. So that's not what this is about. But this is for the being who wants to free themselves from a locked in fate and timeline that has been reintroduced just based off of generational stuff and recording. So sometimes you just want to say, hey, I'm ready to venture off and create an uncharted path and territory for myself, because I trust myself enough to do that. So that's what a lot of this work is really about. I'm not really trying to get into the whole conspiracy thing in all of it. It's a feeling. And, you know, I'm not really into tech, but what I sense is that there are some people who are already connected to this technology. And it's a technology that literally controls your every move. So how do you disconnect from that level of technology? You go to your heart space, you get back to your roots, and you work with your primal self. And then you tap into that purity and creativity that they can't even touch with the technology. They can't touch it. All right. So when you get back to this space, it's just an automatic overriding of the code. And that's what it is. But this is something that cannot be taught. This is a resonance that must be felt. So this is more so about bringing emotion and feeling back to the human before some beings just get lost in complete digital, to where feeling doesn't really have like that much value really to the person necessarily, but all of the attention being paid into the technology itself is payment through energy. So it's not really about a war on AI or anything like that. We cannot sit here and say that we don't collaborate with this force within itself. But it's more so you making a conscious decision on how you want to collaborate with it, not being forced into something that you are not necessarily aware of. And then you find out, or if ever, that now you've lost your complete sovereignty due to being coerced and guided into a path that is leading you to just completely losing your ability to even make choices. So that's the artificial hive mind versus the actual connectivity that we have as beings within this human family, because we do have our own way of telepathy. We have our own way of influencing and connecting in our ways through resonance, through feeling, even through brain activity and all of that. But that's a different level, because it's coming from a very raw and sentient space. Again, that is usually more so primal. So getting back to that and not abandoning the entire temple, the entire picture, okay? Bringing some of that power up so that the mind can actually heal and repair certain neural pathways that have been destructive. So this is something that I just wanted to just bring to surface. And again, a lot of the work is heart-based, primal-based, creative, right? Tapping into the creativity, but and tapping into the psychology. So a lot of what we're going to discuss is mental health based as well. As I said, there's just been a lot of bullshit out there in the spiritual community, only because it's all about spirit and not about like just, hey, well, how am I going to get through the day? I understand what's going on with like the planets and the cosmos, in the sense of like, hey, that's happening and this is happening in the future and this star family is into that. I get that. That's like a lot of the entertainment and the fun that comes with remembering parts of self, right? And different story form and seeing ourselves through the cosmos, inner and outer. But at the same time, how do I get through the day though? How do I get through the day? Because there are some people who are having trouble with that. So let's get back to the basics in that and say, hey, let's come up with a way to really capture ourselves from a soul, like heart and soul space, and seeing the value in that again, so that we can start feeling again and being able to become more inspired to create again. Because it is the creative force that shifts everything. This technology is not as powerful as we think. And that's interesting that I say it in those terms. If there's enough intention to want to tap into the creative force of self. And then, we go on our quote unquote individual timelines only because that's all we can really quote unquote worry about or focus on is just ourselves, right? But at the same time, there is most definitely inspiration and influence that comes from a being that really truly is sitting in their power and moving forward. You don't really have to say much. You can see it and sense it within a being. And right there, you have people already inspired to change their own lives. And that's how you really make change. It's not really about getting on the loudspeaker necessarily and saying, hey, this is what's happening. It's just like, no, how are you? Like, what's going on with you as a person? And let's start there. And then we can get to the spiritual stuff, because you will misinterpret the spiritual if this down here, if that level of discernment is not grounded in something that is nourishing to the rest of you, right? That ground, that root. So just wanted to bring this message once again here recorded. And I look forward to seeing some of you in the workshop. There's been some registrations, but again, 50 participants only, because again, we're going to do some intuitive readings and actual counseling. So people will have the ability to speak on their own testimony, especially with the work that we do. It's going to feel like an intimate retreat. So whatever comes out, whatever you need to share, I want to create that space for us to actually share and feel comfortable with doing so. Because when you're doing inner child work and you're going back to the past so that you can heal it and seal it, so that you can create a nice, timeline for yourself, there's a lot that is usually uncovered and brought to the surface. So there's a lot of personal stuff, so it's a very intimate space. So again, if you're interested, the link is in the bio. That is this upcoming weekend, bringing in that power for the solstice. And again, you'll have 5 workshops that also come with that. So it's an all-encompassing package. And again, you can also drop your email for the Liberation Code Academy if you are interested in the relaunch for next year in January. And I look forward to that as well. So thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.